Alright, in today's presentation, we're going to be discussing the topic, what is a child soldier?
Following that, we'll dive into the causation of the child soldier crisis.
After that, we're going to go over the consequences of the child soldier crisis.
And then finally, we'll cover the responses that the world have to these causations and consequences.
And for the question, what is a child soldier? According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, they define a child soldier as any person below 18 years of age who is or who has been recruited or used by an armed force or armed group in any capacity. Several factors perpetuate Africa to enable the utilization of mass quantities of child soldiers. This presentation will delve into the consequences and responses to this African crisis.
And a common misconception about child soldiers is that they can only fight on the front lines. They can have many occupations and duties, but not limited to spies, cooks, scouts, porters, guards, and sexual slaves. But this occupation is more gender motivated by gender violence. And these children are frequently recruited by means of blackmailing or abduction. These children often lack access to water, sustainable food, and education.
Child soldiers are defined as juveniles taking place in armed groups or forces. Some statistics on their involvement in Africa is listed below. From 2005 to 2020, some 93,000 children were recruited and used in warfare. Grave violations of children have increased 50% in the past 5 years, and an estimated 40% of child soldiers are active in Africa alone. Their role in African conflicts have been an international topic of concern throughout the 21st century.
Most child soldiers are situated in Central Africa. The services of child soldiers are prominent in the Democratic Republic of Congo, with an estimated 30,000 soldiers, Southern Sudan with 19,000 soldiers, and Central African Republic with 10,000 child soldiers. The figures here are estimated and expected to be actually greater volumes, and data implies that child soldiers more than doubled in the last decade. The UN cites the global recruitment and use of some 7,747 juveniles.
The use of child soldiers is a common motive through modern African history, but in order to fully comprehend the crisis, it is important to fully comprehend the scene. An essential part of the causation are underlying causes for conflict in African history. The African Child Soldier PDF attributes the crisis to a few factors for children: extreme poverty, street violence, absence of support structures, and lack of education.
Extreme poverty in Africa is a significant contributing factor to the recruitment of child soldiers. Poverty can make children more vulnerable to recruitment, as they may see joining an armed group as a way to escape poverty and provide for themselves and their families.
In Africa, civil conflicts are coupled with street violence and gang wars over territory. For example, in South Sudan, there's a criminality index of 6.34, which is the 27th highest globally. The Global Peace Index also indicates that the most violent areas on Earth are Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America. This street violence and conflicts around children force them to seek refuge and maybe protection from militia groups that could take advantage of them and exploit them.
Along with many other issues, African children lack access to opportunities. UNESCO reports that approximately 1/5 of children ages 6 through 11 are not being educated in the Sub-Saharan Africa. In the same Sub-Saharan Africa, there is the highest concentration of child soldiers. The overarching theme is that there are few options for African children to provide, enticing them to participate in the active militia operations.
Being a child soldier can have a profound psychological impact on a child. Child soldiers are often exposed to extreme violence, forced to kill or maim others, and witness deaths of their peers. These experiences can lead to a range of mental health issues, including post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. The trauma of being a child soldier can have a long-lasting effect on a person's mental health, making it difficult for them to form healthy relationships, hold down a job, or live a fulfilling life.
Being a child soldier can also have significant physical impacts on a child. Many of them lack inadequate food, improper living conditions, and a lack of access to health care. In the year of 2020, about 67% of new African child soldier recruits were seriously injured, and about a quarter passed away.
The societal impact that child soldiers face can be significant, as many child soldiers struggle to reintegrate into society after leaving their armed group. They face stigma and discrimination from their communities, making it difficult to find a job or establish relationships. Child soldiers may also have difficulty adjusting to civilian life, as they have been exposed to a different set of values and experiences than their peers. Many child soldiers have missed out on education, which can limit their opportunities for the future. Reintegration programs can help child soldiers overcome these challenges, but ongoing support is often needed to ensure their successful reintegration into society.
During the Civil War in the Sierra Leone in the 1990s, it was reported that many of the soldiers fighting for various factions were giving drugs to enhance their performance and suppress their emotions. These drugs, often a combination of cocaine and marijuana, were used to create a sense of aggression and invincibility in the soldiers, making them more effective on the battlefield. The use of drugs has also helped desensitize the soldiers to atrocities that they were committing, including acts of extreme violence and brutality towards citizens. This practice of drugging soldiers is a disturbing aspect of the conflict in the Sierra Leone and highlights the devastating impacts of war on individuals and communities affected by the child soldier crisis.
On top of the physical and psychological effects being a child soldier has, it also heavily affects the communities and societies the children are taken from. The most notable of these societal problems is lack of educated youth. Children who are taken out of school and forced into war are deprived of their potential future contributions to their communities and countries. Additionally, their potential talents and skills are lost.
The use of child soldiers also creates a cycle of perpetual violence. When children are exposed to violence and stress of being a child soldier, they're left with emotional scarring and can often trigger a cycle of revenge-seeking behavior, taking out their emotional baggage on others in unhealthy and dangerous ways.
The use of child soldiers in Africa has significant international consequences that extend beyond the continent's borders. It can lead to sanctions and condemnation from the international community, damaging the reputation of the country involved. Child soldiers are often recruited by armed groups that are involved in regional conflicts, leading to destabilization of neighboring countries. The displacement of refugees, the spread of diseases and violence, and the destruction of infrastructure are all consequences that could impact the surrounding countries. Finally, the recruitment of child soldiers can perpetuate cycles of violence and undermine efforts towards peace and stability in the region, with repercussions that can be felt for generations to come.
Jayden was kidnapped at age 10, and he claims that other children are sought out to carry items, but younger children are preferred. Kidnapped girls become wives and are subject to gender-based violence and sexual abuse. Among other punishments, soldiers who fled or refused to fight were killed.
Organizations recruiting children have fallen under criticism by the world community. A prime offender of recruiting children is the Islamist militant group Boko Haram. They seek to create a pure Islamic state. The organization is present in Nigeria, Chad, Cameroon, and Mali. On the east, Somalia has their own militant Islam group known as the Al-Shabaab. This group is active in the Somali civil war and openly recruits minors. Tens of thousands of citizens have fled Somalia as the civil conflict develops further. Some other prominent child militant groups include Lord's Resistance Army led by Joseph Kony. They're responsible for 13,000 abductions between 2014 and 2019. FPRC, a militant Islamic army in Central African Republic, Revolutionary United Front.
Presently, the issue of children in armed conflict still lingers. As of 2023, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, and South Sudan militant groups remain active. As of 2023, the United Nations has vowed to maintain active efforts against juveniles in combats, offering post-service therapy and other resources to rehabilitate child soldiers. In addition, UNICEF and partners have vowed to offer services to help child soldiers reintegrate into society by offering protection and also mental health resources. Currently, they have helped 13,000 child soldiers become rehabilitated and reintegrated into normal society.
Regional differences in Africa are significant and complex. Some regions, such as West and Central Africa, have seen a high prevalence of child soldiers due to ongoing conflicts and the prevalence of armed groups. In contrast, other regions, such as North Africa, have not seen the same level of child soldier recruitment. The reasons for these include political, economic, and social factors. For example, areas with high levels of poverty and inequality may be more likely to see recruitment of child soldiers, as children are often seen as cheap and easy exploitable labor force. Similarly, areas with weak state intuitions and lack of rule of law may be more susceptible to armed groups and therefore use of child soldiers.
Figures suggest that in the past decade, the number of child soldiers has doubled. And despite positive efforts from groups like UNICEF and the UN, the future of child soldiers doesn't seem to reach a halt. The child soldier will remain an omnipresent figure in the history of Africa.